What's St. Wendelin's? It's a parish with quite a long history. Reopening, I think, 5 years ago, we're looking to create a new identity. So we started thinking about creating a garden space because we thought it's an urban place, an urban neighborhood, and maybe there's a purpose for a garden where people could just sit. Churches have been patrons of the arts, and not only patrons of arts, but artists. And if recent experience has been that we buy a lot of things from catalogs, then you're missing the energy of a process with an artist that you're working with. So yes, the final product might be marble or bronze or wood or fiberglass or whatever material an artist can work in, but in the end, it's a part of a process. You can't predict how people will experience that.
All are welcome, all are welcome.
I've known Sandro for a long time, and I know his style, and I thought he would be a person that would do something in a style that people here in this community would appreciate. We could have gone abstract, we could have done any number of things, but I thought his way of studying, of exploring, and of sculpting was something that would resonate with people in this parish community.
I was born in what used to be called Greater Italy, downtown Cleveland, on the 33rd Street in Woodland. We used to go on Saturday afternoon with our bicycle to the Italian gardens, to the cultural gardens, to the Cleveland Museum of Art, and they used to have classes of drawing. And we knew a woman there who was in what they called, at that time, the French rooms, and she taught us how to look at a work of art and how to see the details and how important it was to get the information. We studied all of these great artists, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, we studied Botticelli. And these are things, when you're young, they just bowl you over because they're so magnificent. We grew up in that environment. My parents being born in Europe, we felt that we were basically European. And so we decided that to go on to Europe. When we got to Italy, it was like, I'm home. But a friend said, why don't you study restoring, which would be really up your alley, and you can make a lot of money that way. So they introduced me to a person by the name of Marcello Lanci, who had one of the finest studios in Via dei Greci in Rome. And I went and I studied with him for a couple of years. I had to clean paintings and all that. And he told me, why don't you get yourself some clay and learn about sculpture, because we have to restore statuary also. And I opened up a book, and there was the head of Minerva with the helmet on, and so I reproduced it in clay. My cousins came to my apartment for tea and coffee, and so my aunt asked me, what are you working on? I said, well, I'm working on a piece of sculpture. She said, oh, can we see it? I uncovered it for them. And my cousin, who was a psychiatrist, said, you're a sculptor. You don't know it, but you're a sculptor. And a professor then asked me if I would study with him at the Academy of Fine Arts in Bologna. When I first started, I was assigned a block of marble by my professor, and it went from amber into white. And it was magnificent. It was a beautiful quality marble. I thought about it, and I saw it. It was the god of winds, Aeolus. I wanted to go back to America, and so my aunt asked me if I would do a Holy Family for Christmas, which would be something that they could remember me by. And so I did, and it was a little group about this big. I left it at the factory where they had done it in ceramics, and they had glazed it and everything else. And it was taken to the City Hall in Fayence, where they were having an exhibit called the Masters of Fire, meaning ceramists. And this piece won the first prize. And they called me into City Hall, and they said, we plan on doing a Holy Family for the Pope in Rome, which was John Paul II, out of ceramics. It took me a year to create the Holy Family. It's now in the Vatican, in the collection of the Pope. And the Pope, actually, there's photographs of it, where the Pope went to my Madonna and he knelt in front of her and he kissed her hands and he kissed the Christ child. So when I came back to Cleveland, they did the statue of St. Mary in Hudson, Ohio, and the marble statues of the Annunciation outside the church. I went with a friend of mine to the Italian Cultural Gardens because they were having a concert. And Joyce Mariani was the president. And she said, you're a sculptor? I said, yeah. She said, I'd love to see some of the work that you've done. And she wanted me to think about doing something about Dante for the Italian gardens. So we met several times and we talked about it. And then I made a sketch. And the next thing we knew, we were doing it. The unveiling of the statue, Mayor Jackson was there, who unveiled it. After that, the mayor was doing something for League Park, and there was a competition with all the artists of Cleveland, and the mayor chose me to do the bust of Fanny Lewis. The spirit of sculpture, according to the Greeks and the Romans and the Italians and the Renaissance and all that, is that once you create a sculpture, the spirit of the person inhabits it. The drawing actually came about because I was scribbling one evening, watching television, and I was starting to fall asleep, and that's when things really happen. This figure came out of St. Wendelin with the dog. Whether or not it was me or whether or not it was something else, I haven't any idea, but I loved it, and I thought it had a lot of energy. And then I went further into making a maquette, which is a clay model.
I knew from the very beginning that what the finished product would be was not going to be like what that little model was early on, because those things always evolve.
And Father Kropak showed it to the people involved here at the parish. And they liked it very, very much, and they decided that that's what we wanted to go with, because it was a piece that gave hope to the people who were praying in the prayer garden. I call this sculpture the Vocation of St. Wendelin. I wanted to do something that was original. And so I decided the part of his being a shepherd would be represented by an Old English sheepdog, which is next to the statue. And he is leaving the life of a shepherd and the sheepdog, and he's going toward the life of being a cleric in the church. It's quite a long process and very complicated, and you have to be extremely careful, because when you're working with a figure like St. Wendelin, there are moments when you need very fine sculpture, like the legs and the ankles, the hands, the fingers. If you have used too much, then you have to start all over again. Doing the sculpture is difficult in itself. The next step of this is to cut this piece. Then when it comes here to the foundry, it has to be not only gated and straightened out and everything else, and then molded. And out of the molds, then they will pour in it a certain amount of red wax. When the waxes are ready, they encase them in brick mixed in with plaster. And it's all done together like a big block. Then it's put into this oven, which is in back of me, and that oven is what we call the burnout. The wax is then burnt out, and because the wax, when it burns out, will be the thickness and the exact situation of the bronze when it's poured in. That's known as the lost wax technique. And then it's buried in a sand pit, which is a certain kind of silicon sand. And then they do the pouring, and they put together all of the elements that they're going to use, you know, the copper, the tin, and all the other stuff. And then they get it ready. And it's fascinating because they all look like they came off of the moon, because they're all dressed in with these white suits, because it's very, very high temperatures and very dangerous. And they pour it. And what happens after they finish pouring the last piece is that we sculptors always break open a bottle of champagne and wish it the very best of luck. Then in about 3 to 5 days, they unbury each piece, they crack open the mold, and then they start cleaning it with brushes and with all kinds of things to get to the bronze. And they start getting it ready to be welded together, the pieces. And that's when the statue starts taking place, and then they keep on working on it. It's a very difficult and long process. The patina is the final coating on the bronze, and that probably will be a kind of a medium bronze finish on it with wax at the end, and then it's going to be sealed so it could stand actually in weather without having any problems with rust or deterioration. Greek pieces and the Roman pieces have lasted for thousands of years. If St. Wendelin will last 1,000 years, it would be great. If not, hey, just the way it goes. I won't be around to see it. You leave your work to posterity, and this is one of the things about being a sculptor.
You may know that Wendelin's name means wanderer, or perhaps journeyer. And so we honor this patron of ours, who journeyed from Scotland to the territory of Germany, who went from shepherd to hermit and to a leader of others who sought union with Christ. We have commissioned this hidden for a few moments image of our patron St. Wendelin to have a prominent place in this garden. We dedicate places like this to a holy purpose.
Rarely today do you see sculptors working in this style. You will see that Sandro pays a lot of attention to the expression of the figure. Most particularly, the eyes are really alive. There's a kind of a spark of living presence in the statue, which is I think I would say pretty much a hallmark of his style. Also, there's a kind of a living presence there. There is a sense that at any moment the figure will be moving in some direction or speaking, but is not quite there yet, sort of incipient motion or something that is about to happen, which gives you a slight sense of suspense. The statue also draws you in. Oftentimes, when you look at the figure, he's looking aside. So that gives you the feeling that you can approach without the figure seeing you. So there's a kind of a invitation that you feel to get closer and closer, which I have to say was also used by ancient sculptors. It's a wonderful, wonderful example in the modern day, today, 2017, of a very ancient Western tradition that goes all the way back to ancient Greece.
I think Sandro was able to capture that movement of being led by the Word of God into this new life that he probably felt himself ill-prepared for. And yet still bearing that sign of his life as a shepherd, the sheepdog, with him, but that very determined look in his face that God has called me to something new. And I like that as an image for this parish community. We're rooted in a past, but God has a future for us too. We're not static. Statues can look very static, but they can also have this kind of internal energy. So I'm hoping people will even explore more than that when they view it, experience it, touch it, that they'll feel some of that energy that it is captured in bronze.
The three things I consider important: head, hand, and heart. The head means it has to be intellectually interesting. It's got to say something to you. Hand is the technique. It's got to have perfection of technique. And then it has to have heart. It's got to have emotions. It has to awaken something inside you. Being a sculptor means that you have to leave something behind for posterity, to live after you're gone.
I don't know what will happen here, but someone will go and will touch that bronze, will hold that book that St. Wendelin holds in his hand, looking for guidance or inspiration or something. And you can't prepare anybody for that. That's what art does. And it's not up on a wall where you can't touch it. It's not far away where you can't experience it. You can walk right up to it. You can touch it. You can feel it. You can do it now when it's nice and warm, and you can come back when it's 10 degrees below zero and touch it and freeze your hand. It's got that permanence. It will be, like any good art, it will be a growing experience for people as they have time to spend with it. None of that an artist can prepare you for or can do. It just happens. This was one way, I think, in a very concrete way, to create something, to do something that is, and it's not just for us, it's for our neighborhood, it's for our community, it's for Duck Island and Tremont and the city of Cleveland. You know, it's not just about St. Wendelin Parish.